The chlorinated water suddenly felt ice cold against Marcus's skin as he surfaced mid-stroke, gasping not from exertion, but from the sight before him Karen Mitchell, standing poolside with two uniformed officers, her manicured finger pointing directly at him like a weapon. "That's him," she declared, her voice cutting through the humid air of the community center. "The one who's been threatening my family." Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs as he treaded water, the pool's edge, and a lie so perfectly crafted it could destroy everything he'd worked to rebuild. The officers' hands moved instinctively toward their belts, and Marcus realized that some battles aren't won in courtrooms or boardrooms. They're fought in public pools at 6 a.m., where the only Marcus Chen had always found solace in the rhythm of his morning swim, stroke, breathe, a meditation of movement that had carried him through the darkest chapters of his life. The Riverside Community Center pool opened at 5:30 a.m., and he was always the first one there, slicing through the chlorinated silence before the world woke up to judge him again. Today was no different. The familiar burn in his shoulders felt good, purposeful. Each lap was a small victory against the depression that had nearly consumed him after the divorce, after losing his job, after the world had decided that Marcus Chen was just another casualty of his own poor choices. But that was 18 months ago. Now, at 34, he was rebuilding. The night shift at the packaging facility wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. The tiny apartment across town wasn't much, but it was his. And these morning swims were his sanctuary. He was midway through his 40th lap when he heard the voices. Completely unacceptable behavior in a family neighborhood. Marcus slowed his stroke, treading water near the deep end. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows that separated the pool from the lobby, he could see Karen Mitchell gesticulating wildly at the front desk. Even from this distance, her platinum blonde hair was unmistakable, pulled back in that severe bun that made her look like she was perpetually disappointed in everyone around her. Karen Mitchell. The name alone made his jaw clench. 3 weeks ago, she'd moved into the Willowbrook subdivision, the same gated community where Marcus used to live with his ex-wife, Sarah. The same community where he'd once been president of the Homeowners Association, where he'd organized charity drives and 4th of July barbecues, where neighbors had actually waved when they saw him jogging past their perfectly manicured lawns. That was before everything fell apart. Marcus pushed off from the pool wall and continued his laps, trying to ignore the growing commotion in the lobby. But Karen's voice carried, sharp and insistent, cutting through the humid air like a blade. "Been harassing my family for weeks. My children are afraid to play in their own backyard." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He stopped swimming entirely, floating in the middle of the pool, staring at the woman who was systematically destroying his reputation with surgical precision. It had started innocently enough. Marcus had been driving through his old neighborhood after work one morning, taking the long way home from the night shift. It wasn't healthy, he knew, but sometimes he couldn't help himself. He'd slow down as he passed his former house, now occupied by a young couple with twin toddlers who had no idea that the previous owner used to stand in that same driveway, hosing down his BMW on Saturday mornings, while Sarah planted flowers in the beds that now held different plants, different dreams. The first time he'd seen Karen Mitchell, she'd been standing in her driveway, berating a landscaping crew for using the wrong shade of mulch. Even from across the street, Marcus could see the worker's shoulders sagging under the weight of her criticism. He'd felt a familiar stab of sympathy. He'd been on the receiving end of that kind of public humiliation more times than he cared to remember. But Karen had noticed him. Their eyes had met across the street, and something in her expression had shifted. Calculation, suspicion, like she was cataloging his presence, filing it away for future use. The second time, he'd been sitting in his car outside the Starbucks on Maple Street, drinking coffee and reading on his phone before heading home. Karen had emerged from the store, seen him, and immediately turned around to go back inside. Through the window, he'd watched her speaking animatedly to the barista, pointing in his direction. By the third time when he'd stopped at the grocery store in the same plaza where Sarah used to shop, where he'd bumped into old neighbors who suddenly seemed uncomfortable making eye contact. Marcus had realized that Karen Mitchell wasn't just noticing him, she was building a narrative. And now, as he watched her through the pool windows, gesturing toward uniformed officers who had apparently arrived while he was swimming, Marcus understood that the narrative was complete. There he is. Karen's voice rose triumphantly. The pool. I told you he'd be here. The officer's a middle-aged man with gray at his temples, and a younger woman with sharp eyes followed Karen's gaze to the pool. Marcus felt exposed, vulnerable, treading water in nothing but swim trunks, while fully clothed, strangers stared at him through the glass. He swam to the edge of the pool, hauling himself up in one fluid motion. Water cascaded from his shoulders as he reached for his towel, hyper-aware of every movement, every gesture that might be misinterpreted. The pool area door opened with a pneumatic hiss. "Sir." The older officer's voice was professional but cautious. "We'd like to have a word with you." Marcus wrapped the towel around his waist, buying time. "About what?" "About your recent behavior." Toward Mrs. Mitchell and her family, Karen stepped forward, her face a mask of righteous indignation. "Officer Martinez, this is exactly what I was telling you about. He's been stalking my family for weeks, driving by our house, following us to stores, showing up wherever we go." That's not Marcus started, but Karen wasn't finished. "My children are terrified. Yesterday, my 8-year-old daughter asked me why the angry man keeps watching our house. How do you explain that to a child?" The younger officer, whose nameplate read Torres, had her hand resting casually on her radio. "Sir, we've received multiple reports about your behavior. Mrs. Mitchell says you've been following her family, taking pictures of her home, making threatening gestures when she tries to confront you. Taking pictures." Marcus's voice cracked. "Threatening gestures. I've never even spoken to this woman, because you run away every time I try to address you," Karen shot back, like a coward, like someone who knows exactly what he's doing wrong. The pool area suddenly felt claustrophobic. The chlorine smell was too strong, the fluorescent lights too bright. Marcus could feel his chest tightening, that familiar panic response that had plagued him during the worst days after the divorce. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," he said carefully. "I used to live in Willowbrook. Sometimes I drive through the neighborhood. That's not illegal. Used to live there." Officer Martinez's eyebrows rose. "When was this?" "Until about 2 years ago. My ex-wife and I owned a house on Elm Street." Karen's expression shifted, and Marcus caught a flash of something surprise, concern. But it was gone so quickly he might have imagined it. "That doesn't give you the right to stalk my family," she said, her voice rising. "I don't care what your sob story is. I have children to protect." "Ma'am," Officer Torres interjected. "Let's keep this civil. Sir, regardless of your history with the neighborhood, if you're making residents uncomfortable, we need to address that." Marcus felt the walls closing in. This was exactly how it had started before with Sarah, with his job, with every relationship. That had crumbled under the weight of misunderstandings and assumptions. The truth became irrelevant when people decided you were the villain in their story. "I haven't done anything wrong," he said, but even to his own ears, it sounded defensive, desperate. "Then why?" Karen asked, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Did you key my car?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. "What?" "Yesterday morning. Someone scratched a message into my BMW. Remember me?" In 6-inch letters down the driver's side. Karen's eyes were bright with tears. Now real or performed, Marcus couldn't tell. "My daughter saw it. She asked me what it meant. What was I supposed to tell her?" Marcus stared at her, his mind racing. He'd never keyed anyone's car. He'd never written any message. He'd never even been close enough to Karen's property to touch anything, let alone vandalize it. But as he looked at the faces surrounding him, the officers' expressions hardening, Karen's tears threatening to spill over, even the community center staff who had gathered to watch the drama unfold, Marcus realized that the truth was irrelevant. Someone had keyed Karen Mitchell's car. Someone had written, "Remember me," in the paint. And Marcus Chen, the ex-husband who drove through his old neighborhood, the night shift worker who swam alone at dawn, the man who had already lost everything. Once Marcus was the perfect suspect. "I didn't do that," he said, but his voice was barely a whisper. "Sir," Officer Martinez said, his tone shifting from professional to authoritative, "we're going to need you to come with us to answer some questions. Am I under arrest?" "Not at this time, but Mrs. Mitchell is filing a formal complaint, and we need to investigate these allegations." Marcus looked. The fluorescent lights in interview room B cast harsh shadows across the metal table. making everything look like a crime scene. Marcus sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair, his damp hair still smelling of chlorine, watching Officer Martinez flip through a manila folder that seemed to contain his entire life reduced to police reports and complaint forms. "So you admit you've been in the Willowbrook neighborhood multiple times over the past 3 weeks," Martinez said, not looking up from his notes. "I admitted, I've driven through it, yes." Marcus kept his voice steady, though his hands were trembling slightly. "It's not a crime to drive on public roads. No, but harassment is." Officer Torres leaned against the wall, her arms crossed. "Mrs. Mitchell has documented 17 separate incidents of you being in her vicinity." 17, Mr. Chen. "That's not coincidence." Marcus felt the familiar weight of being misunderstood settling on his chest. "I work nights. I get off at 6 a.m. Sometimes I take different routes home. Sometimes that route goes through my old neighborhood, your old neighborhood, where you lost your house in a messy divorce," Martinez said, finally looking up. "Where your ex-wife still lives, 3 blocks from Mrs. Mitchell." The room seemed to shrink. "How do you know about my divorce?" "Mrs. Mitchell did her homework," Torres said. "Pulled property records, looked up court filings. She's thorough." A chill ran down Marcus's spine. "She investigated me. She protected her family," Martinez corrected, "which is what any responsible parent would do when a stranger starts showing up everywhere they go." Marcus stared at the one-way mirror on the wall, wondering who might be watching from the other side. "I'm not a stranger. I lived in that community for 5 years. I was the HOA president. I organized the annual charity drives." "That was before you lost your job for embezzling funds," Torres said casually. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. "I didn't embezzle anything. The charges were dropped." "Charges were dropped due to insufficient evidence," Martinez read from the file. "That's not the same as being innocent." "It is in this country," Marcus said, his voice rising. "Or it used to be." The 2 officers exchanged a glance. Marcus realized he was falling into the same trap that had destroyed his marriage, his career, his reputation. The more he defended himself, the more guilty he sounded. "Let's talk about the car," Torres said, pulling out her phone. She swiped to a photo and turned it toward Marcus. "This is Mrs. Mitchell's BMW as of yesterday morning." Marcus stared at the image. The scratch was deep, deliberate, carved into the metallic blue paint, like a scar. "Remember me," stretched across the entire driver's side in jagged letters. "I didn't do this," he said quietly. "Who did?" Martinez asked. "I don't know. Come on, Mr. Chen. Remember me." "That's not exactly subtle." Someone wanted Mrs. Mitchell to know exactly who was sending a message. Marcus studied the photo more carefully. Something about the scratches bothered him, but he couldn't put his finger on what. "When was this discovered?" "Yesterday morning, around 7 a.m. Mrs. Mitchell was leaving to take her kids to school. I was at work yesterday from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. I have a time card, security cameras, witnesses." Torres and Martinez exchanged another look. "The damage could have been done any time between Sunday evening and Monday morning," Torres said. "A pretty wide window." "I was home Sunday evening. I can prove it." How Marcus's mind raced. How did anyone prove they were home alone? "I ordered dinner. Pizza. There should be a delivery record." "What time?" "Around 8:30. And after that, I went to bed. I had to work that night. So between 8:30 Sunday evening and when you left for work at 10:30, you were alone in your apartment with no witnesses," Martinez summarized. Marcus felt the trap closing. "I didn't vandalize her car, then explain this." Torres swiped to another photo. This one showed Marcus's own car beat up. Honda Civic parked on a residential street. This was taken Sunday evening at 9:15 p.m. Willowbrook subdivision, 1 block from Mrs. Mitchell's house. Marcus stared at the image, his blood turning to ice. It was definitely his car. The dent in the rear bumper, the faded paint on the hood. The parking sticker from his old job still stuck to the windshield. But he had no memory of being there Sunday evening. He struggled to find words. "I don't remember driving there." "You don't remember?" Torres's voice was sharp. "Mr. Chen, that was 2 days ago. I've been working a lot of overtime. I've been tired. Sometimes He stopped, realizing how pathetic he sounded. "Sometimes you what?" Martinez pressed. Sometimes I drive without really thinking about where I'm going. It's like autopilot. The officers exchanged yet another look, and Marcus knew he was digging his grave deeper with every word. So you admit you were in the neighborhood the night Mrs. Mitchell's car was vandalized. But you don't remember being there, Martinez said. I remember ordering pizza. I remember going to bed. I don't remember driving anywhere. Mr. Chen, Torres said, sitting down across from him. I'm going to be straight with you. We have a pattern of behavior here. You've been stalking this family for weeks. You were in the neighborhood the night of the vandalism. The message on the car is clearly personal. And now you're claiming you don't remember being there. Marcus felt his chest tightening again. I'm not claiming anything. I'm telling you the truth. The truth is that you're obsessed with your old life, Martinez said. You can't let go of what you lost. And now you're taking it out on an innocent family. That's not Mrs. Mitchell's. 8-year-old daughter is having nightmares, Torres interrupted. She's afraid to go outside because she thinks the angry man is going to hurt her family. Is that what you want? Marcus stared at the table, his reflection distorted in the metal surface. I would never hurt a child, but you're comfortable. Terrifying one. I'm not terrifying anyone. I'm trying to rebuild my life. By stalking your old neighborhood, by processing my grief. The words exploded out of Marcus before he could stop them. I lost everything. Okay, my wife, my house, my job, my reputation. Sometimes I drive through the neighborhood because it's the only place I ever felt like I belonged. Sometimes I sit in my car and try to remember what it felt like to be happy. That's not stalking. That's just being human. The room fell silent. Torres and Martinez stared at him, their expressions unreadable. Mr. Chen, Martinez said finally, grief doesn't give you the right to make other people afraid. I'm not making anyone afraid. I'm just existing. Your existence is causing problems for the Mitchell family. Then maybe the Mitchell family should mind their own business. As soon as the words left his mouth, Marcus knew he'd made a mistake. Torres leaned forward, her eyes bright with something that looked like triumph. So you do have feelings about Mrs. Mitchell specifically? I have feelings about being falsely accused. She's not falsely accusing you. She's protecting her family from a man who's clearly unstable. Marcus felt the walls closing in again. Every word he spoke seemed to make things worse. I want a lawyer. You're not under arrest, Martinez reminded him. You're free to leave at any time. Then I'm leaving. Marcus stood up, his legs unsteady. Mr. Chen, Torres called as he reached for the door handle. If you go near Mrs. Mitchell or her family again, we will arrest you. Do you understand? Marcus turned back to face them. I understand that you've already decided I'm guilty. We've decided that a mother's concern for her children's safety takes precedence over your right to drive wherever you want, Martinez said. Stay away from Willowbrook. Stay away from Mrs. Mitchell. Stay away from anywhere she might be. How am I supposed to know where she might be? Marcus walked out of the interview room feeling like he'd been stripped naked in public. The desk sergeant barely looked up as he passed through the lobby, but Marcus could feel the weight of judgment in every casual glance. Outside, the morning sun was bright and harsh after the fluorescent lights of the police station. Marcus stood on the sidewalk, disoriented, trying to remember where he'd parked his car. The same car that had somehow ended up in Willowbrook on Sunday evening, though, he had no memory of driving it there. His phone buzzed. A text from his supervisor at the packaging facility. Heard you got picked up by police. Don't bother coming in tonight. We'll call you. Marcus stared at the message, his hands shaking. In the space of 3 hours, he'd gone. From swimming laps, to being interrogated, to losing his job. Again, he found his car in the visitor parking lot. The same beat-up Honda Civic that had somehow become evidence in a case he didn't understand. As he slid behind the wheel, Marcus noticed something he'd missed before: a small scrape on the passenger door, fresh metal showing through the paint. He ran his finger over the scratch, trying to remember when it had happened. Like the drive to Willowbrook, it was a blank in his memory. Marcus started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, his mind racing. Someone had keyed Karen Mitchell's car. Someone had taken a photo of his car in her neighborhood. Someone was systematically destroying his life, and he was the only one who seemed to realize it. As he drove home through the mid-morning traffic, Marcus caught sight of a metallic blue BMW in his rearview mirror. It followed him for 6 blocks. Before turning into a shopping center, but not before he got a clear look. The sleep medication had been a mistake. Marcus realized that now, staring at the empty bottle on his nightstand, as fragments of the past 3 weeks slowly reassembled themselves in his mind like pieces of a shattered mirror. The pills his doctor had prescribed after the divorce, the same pills he'd been taking sporadically when the insomnia got too bad, when the weight of his failures pressed down on his chest like a physical thing. Ambien, the walking, talking, driving sleep medication, that could make you do things you'd never remember. Marcus sat on the edge of his bed, his hands shaking as he counted backward. Sunday evening, the night Karen's car was vandalized, had taken 2 pills after the pizza delivery. He'd been exhausted from working overtime, stressed about his dwindling savings, desperate for a few hours of oblivion. The last thing he remembered was lying down around 9 o'clock. The next thing he knew, his alarm was going off at 10:30 for his night shift. Somewhere in between, he'd apparently driven to Willowbrook, keyed Karen Mitchell's car, and returned home with no memory of any of it. "Jesus Christ," he whispered to the empty room. His phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number. "The truth is coming out. Stop pretending you don't remember." Marcus stared at the message, his blood turning to ice. Whoever was sending these texts knew about his memory gaps. They knew about the medication. They knew things that should have been private. He threw on clothes and grabbed his keys. If he was going to figure out who was destroying his life, he needed to start with the one person who had the most to gain from his downfall. The drive to Willowbrook took 23 minutes. Marcus parked 2 blocks away from Karen Mitchell's house, in the same spot where his car had been photographed Sunday evening. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was now deliberately doing what he'd been accused of doing all along. Karen's house was a sprawling colonial with perfect landscaping and a circular driveway. The BMW was parked in front, its scratched side facing the street, like a badge of victimhood. Marcus could see the damage clearly from where he sat. His handiwork, even if he couldn't remember doing it. He was about to get out of his car when the front door opened. Karen emerged, but she wasn't alone. A man followed Hertel, dark-haired, wearing an expensive suit that looked out of place in the suburban afternoon. They stood close together on the porch, their conversation intense and private. Marcus fumbled for his phone, switching it to camera mode. Through the zoom lens, he could see the man's face clearly. Mid-40s, sharp features, the kind of confident bearing that came from money and power. He looked familiar, but Marcus couldn't place him. The man handed Karen an envelope. She opened it, counted what appeared to be cash, then folded it into her purse. They embraced not the casual hug of friends, but something more intimate. The man's hand lingered on her lower back as they separated. Marcus kept recording as the man walked to a black Mercedes parked across the street. The license plate was partially obscured, but Marcus caught enough to run it later. As the Mercedes pulled away, Karen stood in her driveway, watching it disappear. Around the corner, then she turned and looked directly at Marcus's car. Even from 2 blocks away, he could see her smile. Marcus's hands went numb. She'd known he was there. She'd wanted him to see the exchange, to witness whatever game she was playing. But why? His phone rang, making him jump. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. "Hello, Marcus." "Chen." The voice was professional, female. "This is Detective Sarah Walsh with the County Sheriff's Department. I need you to come in for questioning regarding an incident that occurred this morning." Marcus's chest tightened. "What incident?" "Mrs. Karen Mitchell's house was broken into early this morning. Several items were taken, including jewelry and electronics. A neighbor reported seeing a man matching your description in the area around 3 a.m. Marcus stared at Karen's house, his mind racing. "I was home asleep at 3 a.m. Can anyone verify that? I live alone. Mr. Chen, I'm going to need you to come in voluntarily, or I can send units to pick you up. Your choice." Marcus looked at his phone, checking the time. It was 2:17 p.m. He'd been home asleep from midnight until noon. He was sure of it, wasn't he? "I'll come in," he said. "Good. Sheriff's Station on 5th Street. Ask for Detective Walsh." Marcus hung up and stared at Karen's house one more time. She was still standing in the driveway, but now she was on her phone, speaking animatedly to someone. As he watched, she gestured toward his car, then toward her house, then toward the scratched BMW. She was narrating his presence to whoever was on the other end of the call. building her case in real time. Marcus started his car and drove away, his mind spinning. Someone had broken into Karen's house, someone who looked like him, someone who had been there at 3 a.m. when he was supposedly home asleep. But as he drove toward the sheriff's station, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something crucial. The man in the expensive suit, the envelope full of cash, Karen's smile when she'd spotted him watching. None of it made sense unless, after being transferred 3 times, he finally got through to Dr. Patel's nurse. "I need to know about my prescription," Marcus said, the Ambien. "How long can it stay in your system? Mr. Chen, you really should discuss this with the doctor directly, please. It's important. How long?" A pause. Typically, Ambien is eliminated from the system within 12 to 24 hours, but everyone metabolizes it differently. Some people can have residual effects for longer, especially if they've been taking it regularly. Marcus's blood went cold. Residual effects like what? Confusion, memory problems, impaired judgment. In rare cases, complex behaviors like driving or eating with no memory of the activity. For how long after the last dose? "Mr. Chen, if you're concerned about your medication, you really need to." How long? Another pause. In extreme cases, up to 72 hours, but that's very rare. Marcus hung up and sat in his car, staring at the traffic rushing past. 72 hours he'd taken the Ambien Sunday evening. It was now Tuesday afternoon, well within the window for residual effects, which meant he could have broken into Karen's house this morning and had no memory of it. Just like he'd had no memory of vandalizing her car, his phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number. "You're starting to remember, aren't you? It's going to get worse before it gets better." Marcus stared at the message, his hand shaking. Whoever was sending these texts knew about his medication, knew about his memory gaps, knew things that should have been impossible to know, unless they were the ones orchestrating it all. He arrived at the sheriff's station 20 minutes later. Detective Walsh was waiting for him, a woman in her 50s, with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. She led him to an interview, the room that was identical to the one at the police station, complete with the same harsh fluorescent lighting and uncomfortable chairs. "Mr. Chen," she began, settling into the chair across from him. "Let's start with your whereabouts between midnight and 6 a.m. this morning." "I was home, asleep." "Can anyone verify that?" "I live alone." "What about your neighbors? Did anyone see you come home from work?" Marcus thought about it. "I don't think so. I try to be quiet when I come home. People are sleeping." "What time did you get home?" "Around 7:30 a.m. Detective Walsh made a note. "That's interesting, because Mrs. Mitchell's neighbor saw someone matching your description leaving her backyard at approximately 3:15 a.m. Marcus felt the familiar weight of being trapped. "I wasn't there." The neighbor was very specific. White male, approximately 5'10", dark hair, wearing a dark jacket. She got a good look at him under the streetlight. A lot of people matched that description. Not a lot of people have been stalking Mrs. Mitchell for the past 3 weeks. Marcus clenched his fists under the table. "I haven't been stalking anyone. Mr. Chen, we have documented evidence of your obsession with Mrs. Mitchell. We have witnesses who saw you in her neighborhood multiple times. We have physical evidence linking you to the vandalism of her car. And now we have a witness who saw you leaving her property after a burglary. What was taken?" Detective Walsh consulted her notes. "Jewelry, electronics, some cash, about $15,000 worth of items." $15,000. Marcus's voice cracked. "Why would I steal $15,000 worth of stuff and then not remember it?" "That's a good question. Why would you?" Marcus stared at the table, his reflection distorted in the metal surface. "I think someone is drugging me." Detective Walsh looked up from her notes. "Excuse me, I've been having memory gaps. Things happening that I don't remember. I think someone is slipping me something, making me do things." "Mr. Chen, that's a very serious accusation. Do you have any evidence to support it?" Marcus thought about the laptop that had been opened in his apartment, the blue paint under his fingernail, the anonymous texts. "Someone has been in my apartment. Someone has been watching me, following me. I think they're setting me up. Who would do that? I don't know. But I saw something today. Mrs. Mitchell meeting with a man taking money from him. There's something else going on here." Detective Walsh leaned back in her chair. "Mr. Chen, I've been doing this job for 23 years. I've heard every excuse, every con,